So I think the trunk of the tree represents the second component of a flexible mind, which is willingness.
Mm.
Willingness to have difficult thoughts and feelings rather than suppress, avoid, or try to get rid of them, which is often counterproductive. So if I'm really focused on not being anxious, lo and behold, I've just made myself anxious. If I'm busy trying not to think about particular thoughts, I end up keeping them on my radar. So if I said to the listeners, hey, don't think about a pink elephant, I think there'd be a fair proportion of them might end up thinking precisely of pink elephants. So there's something about this willingness to allow thoughts and feelings to be there rather than struggling against them.
Welcome to Untangle. I'm Patricia Karpus. We are so happy you're with us today. As always, we are the podcast from Muse, the brain sensing headband that helps to transform your brain. It is great for sleep, for meditation, for focus, and so much more. Use promo code Untangle15 at choosemuse.com for your discount. Now, on to today's guest. Ross, welcome to Untangle. It's great to have you with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, straight from Ireland, a place that I am dying to go to. Can't believe I haven't been there.
Well, there's a welcome on the mat
Oh,
if and
thank
when you do get round. Call in and I'll have a cup of coffee ready and waiting.
So let's start with this question. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, I have worked for many years with clients, really helping them to both perform well and feel well. So I work a lot with athletes, but also business executives. And they often ask me through the course of the work that I do, would there be any books that you might recommend that sit alongside the work that we're doing and complement it?
Mhm.
And certainly there were books that I would be happy to recommend. For example, Russ Harris and his work around the happiness trap. And yeah, I thought that would be a great complement to the work that we were doing, but it didn't quite fit perfectly with how I was integrating some of the interventions around acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a big part of the work that I do.
Yeah.
And it's known by the acronym ACT, but I was integrating in compassion focused therapy as well. So I'm really interested in those more recent innovations in cognitive behavioral therapies. So that really inspired me to put the book together to help those that I support understand themselves better, to find that balance, if you like, between, yes, performing to an optimal level, but also taking care of themselves so that they can continue to take care of business in the long run. So that's really what motivated me to have a resource that would sit alongside the work that I was doing with clients so that I could also extend my reach a bit, that it wasn't just about getting one-to-one support with myself. It was a resource that people could read and just learn. That's a big passion of mine, sharing knowledge about psychological concepts and finding a way of communicating that that's jargon free, that's helping to access wider audiences. So that was a big part of it as well.
Yeah. And trees are a big part of the metaphor and languaging in these books. And what is it that you think trees have to teach us about being more flexible, resilient humans?
Great. So the title of the book is The Tree That Bends, How a Flexible Mind Can Help You Thrive. And that title actually comes from a Tanzanian proverb: the wind does not break the tree that bends. So I just thought that was a beautiful metaphor
Mhm.
for the work that I do. And for me, the anatomy of a tree was a beautiful way of capturing these different aspects of psychological flexibility, or a flexible mind, as I call it in the book. And psychological flexibility is about shifting the relationship we have with thoughts and feelings so that they don't block us from doing the things that matter to us. So it's about having difficult thoughts and emotions and still doing the things that matter. So the anatomy of a tree, if we can break it down into three sections, we've got the roots of the tree that help to keep it in place. I think the roots of the tree represent this anchored element of a flexible mind. What does that mean? Well, anchored in the here and now, where our lives are unfolding. Too often we do this mental time travel or we visit past regrets or difficult experiences and memories of those experiences from our history, or we're zipping into the future, anticipating what might happen and worrying about what might happen. So being anchored is about, yes, being where your feet are, not where your head's at.
Hmm.
Being here in this moment and in this place and able to recognize that thoughts and feelings come and go. So that's the roots of the tree. The trunk of the tree, I think, is a beautiful way of capturing how a tree sways in the wind to
Hmm.
absorb some of that turbulence and indeed to harness it so it can sway back, come back to center. So I think the trunk of the tree represents the second component of a flexible mind, which is willingness.
Hmm.
Willingness to have difficult thoughts and feelings rather than suppress, avoid, or try to get rid of them, which is often counterproductive. So if I'm really focused on not being anxious, lo and behold, I've just made myself anxious. If I'm busy trying not to think about particular thoughts, I end up keeping them on my radar. So if I said to the listeners, hey, don't think about a pink elephant, I think there'd be a fair proportion of them might end up thinking precisely of pink elephants. So there's something about this willingness to allow thoughts and feelings to be there rather than struggling against them. And then finally, the third component or anatomy of the tree is the crown of the tree. And the crown of a tree is its branches and its leaves, and that's the engine room of the tree. That's how it produces its fuel so it can grow and develop. And I just thought that was a beautiful way of
Hmm.
capturing the third element of a flexible mind, which is being empowered by our sense of purpose and our personal values. So the anatomy of the tree, roots, trunk, and crown represent the three components of a flexible mind, being anchored, willing, and empowered. This might be a little cheesy, Patricia, but if you think about the acronym that creates, it's A.
Right. Right. Let me ask you a question because this is I'm going to give you a real life example because I feel like this description is so beautiful and it's so poetic. And I just love the way you've used the tree to break down how we, root ourselves and we allow our thoughts and feelings just to be there, but we stay rooted. And it's all very beautiful. So, a, a couple of weeks ago, I was driving and
Mhm,
a car hit me from behind. I wasn't hurt, and my car was damaged. But in my mind, I'm like, I hate driving. I'm never driving again. I'm such an anxious driver. So, car's getting fixed. I'm in a rental car, and I am the most nervous driver.
mhm,
I'm so nervous. I cannot just stop looking behind me to see if a car is too close and it's going to hit me. So that's a very real example of that you should calm
mhm,
your thoughts and feelings, ground into the car, do the best you can, and just drive.
mhm,
But given what a tree can teach me,
mhm,
can I do to be a safe, good, stress-free driver and not worry. I mean, and often this happens with you get PTSD, right?
mhm,
You have a trauma, whether it's large or small, and then you're forever anticipating that trauma
mhm,
is going to happen again.
mhm,
And could make it happen again by just anticipating that. What
mhm.
is in the tree metaphor? What can we do to allow the anxious thoughts to be there, but not be anxious?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm sorry to hear about your experience, right? I'm glad that you're okay. And I
Thanks.
can understand how anxious that may be making you feel after that because we can have those concerns it's going to happen again,
Right,
which
right.
can make us very wary of trying to commit to traveling in the car. So it's great to have an example that we can use and work with. And I think it's important to recognize that emotions serve important functions, right? And we're hardwired to experience anxiety. We're hardwired to experience fear. We're hardwired to experience sadness and joy and many other emotions. And I like to use this idea that we should treat emotions as messengers.
Mhm.
We have to
Yeah, I
understand the
read that.
function that sits behind the experience that we're having. So there is a function to the anxiety, right? It's there to try to keep you safe because you matter. Your life matters. You matter to other people. And it's important that you're safe and that you stay well. So treat emotions as messengers. Why is that important? Well, I think often what happens is we have these emotional reactions, and let's call them primary emotions, which we're hardwired to experience. We then have this thing where we layer on another layer, and we'll call those secondary emotions. And those are often linked to the judgments that we make
Mm,
about the fact that we are experiencing the anxiety. I should maybe try to avoid driving because this anxiety will show up. And there's maybe a sense of loss as a secondary emotion that might show up if you have to relinquish control of the steering wheel and step away. Or we might have self criticism about the fact that we can't get to grips with the anxiety that we're experiencing. What's wrong with me? I should be able to get a handle on this. And
mhm.
I was really aware that you used the word should in your
Mhm.
description, right? I should. And we can shoot ourselves to death because our minds will give us those judgments. So being able to recognize that it's a primary emotion, the anxiety, being able to recognize that it's serving important functions as well, can help to really just slow down the progression into those secondary emotions.
Mhm.
Now, being anchored in the here and now is about contacting the breadth of your present moment experiences. So, if you are in the car, you will notice that you're starting to feel those anxiety symptoms, and it's important to recognize that it's there. But anchoring is about being where your feet are, being in the seat, feeling the breadth of experiences that you're having, contact between you and the back of the chair, your hands on the wheel, being curious about how the wheel might feel, as well as recognizing that those emotions are there. The willingness element is about, well, pick up on the urge that you have initially to respond to the emotion that you're experiencing, the anxiety. And are you aware of the urges that you might have? Perhaps you're aware of wanting to get out of the car or,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Yes.
So notice the urge that's
Mhm.
there and validate it. Okay. It's okay for that urge to be there. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to get hooked in and reacting to it.
Mhm.
So I then encourage people really to start to locate where in their body they're noticing the felt experience of the anxiety.
Mhm.
Do you know where you were feeling the anxiety? Perhaps it was butterflies in your tummy or tightness in your chest. Can you remember?
Yeah, it's a lot in my chest. Yes.
Yeah. Often people
Yeah.
feel that anxiety
Yes.
here or maybe a little lower in their tummy. And then I would encourage you to try to assign some physical characteristics to the felt experience of that anxiety. So, in that part of your chest where you're feeling that tightness, the invitation is to think, well, if it had a color, what color might that felt experience in your chest have been? Any sense of color?
Oh, but I'm gonna think about that one.
Color can be tricky for some people. And if that's not coming through, what I'd encourage you to do is to think about maybe describing the energy that feeling had in your chest. Can you say a little more to me about what that energy felt like?
Well, it's all about fear.
Mm,
I mean, the energy is fear, the
yeah,
fear that anything can happen to you and it may or may not be something that you have any control over. Like in this situation, I was just stopped in traffic
Patricia,
and
if I could just encourage you to stick with that, right? And to
yeah.
slow it down. Yeah, because that's important. So it's a fear feeling in the chest,
Mhm.
right? And I'm encouraging you just to be curious and to lean in. Fear's not a nice thing to go towards, right? So I applaud you for your willingness and courage just to slow things down here and to lean into it a little. But yeah, if you can say a little more about the felt experience of that. So it could be a color, it could be an energy, it could be a texture. If you were to think about the texture of that feeling in your chest, How might you try to describe that to me?
Yeah, it's, I guess, would be more like a sharpness,
Yeah.
like I feel like anytime we have an accident,
Hmm.
we fear the possibility of that happening again in any way, or
Right.
we hear about an accident, and it just is a nervous system driver that when, you talk about, making room for difficult thoughts, but also
Hmm.
grounding yourself in the reality of, I'm
Hmm.
in this car, I'm safe now, or wherever someone is, I'm in this place, I'm safe now. I'm just going to focus on what I can do
Yeah.
and then allow for like things will happen
And what you've
that we have.
described is a perfect description of how I might, and indeed I've been involved in a road traffic accident. I actually talk about it in the book, right? And
Right.
yeah, I remember those kind of scripts that my mind would give me about can't commit to being in a car again because this might happen. And it actually prevented me getting my driving license for 10 years, right? So this was quite a profound
I'm
incident
sorry. Yeah.
for me. No, well, thank you. And this was before, obviously, trained as a clinical psychologist, but I was full of these scripts. And the encouragement is almost to notice how we get, and I'm going to call it mindy, where we go up into our head, we start to generate those scripts about what might
Hmm.
happen. And I'm asking us, inviting you just to slow things down and come back into that felt experience. And why is that important? Well, if we can show up, make room, observe, and notice the felt experience of the emotion, we can then start to recognize, well, in this moment, I can hold the felt experience of that emotion. And I can now choose to respond in a way that's consistent with my sense of my personal values. And that's really going to prompt me to ask you to think about, well, what is it that would matter enough? What's important enough for you to commit to being in a car, even though the felt experience of that pain
Mm,
and worry and fear and anxiety might be there? What is it that matters enough for you to want to drive?
yeah. I mean, that is a really good question because it's the question that inspires us to think of our
Mhm.
bigger why and that it's worth doing. We've made this choice and now we have to ground ourselves into it. And as you're talking about purpose and values, I wanted to, understand a little bit more about how you think about acceptance and commitment therapy. How did you choose to focus on? I know you're, clinical psychologist and cognitive behavior therapy is
Mhm.
really important to you, but acceptance and commitment therapy has so many really rich tools in it. What are some of the core principles and processes of acceptance and commitment therapy that can help us through difficult times
Yeah.
and to make good choices for
Mhm.
ourselves?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking that. And yeah, just as a bridge, if you like, between that piece we were talking about
Mhm.
into this really important question, it's important to recognize that, yeah, we're hardwired to have these emotional reactions, whether it be fear or anxiety, just like we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And yeah, if we're hardwired to experience them, perhaps we can experience them in service of what it is that truly matters to us, which links to the point you were making about purpose and personal values. So, yeah, what is it that matters enough for you to have the fear and anxiety and still do that thing? And for some people, it might be about recognizing that their family members might depend on them in an emergency to drive the car. For others, it might be in recognition that driving is an important part of their work and their mission. So perhaps then the anxiety is worth having. Now it doesn't magic it away, but it dignifies it and it gives it some form of validation. So acceptance and commitment therapy, I think, is a great modality for helping people to understand the functions that emotions can serve in particular contexts, And it does have a set of processes that are helpful for shifting the relationship we have with our thoughts and our emotions so our choices can be better informed by our sense of purpose and our personal values. Whenever I started to learn about ACT, I just loved the idea of what else would I be doing if I wasn't busy trying not to have particular experiences? And I think at the time that I came to clinical psychology and ACT, I recognized that I got into avoidant patterns in terms of not wanting to have certain emotions, and that was dictating to me the choices that I was making. And I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I wasn't feeling contented. Rather than moving towards what really mattered to me, I was moving away from experiences that I didn't want to have. And I think ACT just beautifully spoke to that kind of contrast. And it was a gift in my life in terms of shifting the thoughts and emotions the relationship I had with thoughts and emotions. And I could then speak from a much more authentic space in supporting my clients because these processes made sense to me. And I think that's a much more authentic space to work with my client group with. It's important, of course, to facilitate choice for the client in the intervention that they might be best placed to engage in. But I do think ACT as an intervention has a great range of potential application. And that's the beauty that I saw in it. And I'm glad that I've been able to develop my understanding of it and indeed to train others in acceptance and commitment therapy too, which is a big part of my work.
Is so staying with acceptance and commitment therapy, if someone is having a low mood and
Mhm.
they're having difficult feelings and they have a choice to get into bed and pull the covers over their head, get out and take a walk, write in a journal, meditate, breathe through it. What does ACT invite us to do when we're feeling less than whole?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it speaks to those elements of psychological flexibility that I mentioned.
Mhm,
ACT can
mhm.
help us to be more anchored in the here and now,
Mm,
recognizing that those thoughts and feelings are present and that there are a range of other experiences that are also present. Because often when our mood is low, our attention and our focus can narrow and we start to lose contact with the broader range of experiences that we're having. Perhaps the sound of the birds and the trees outside, the sunshine coming through the
mhm,
open window. Um, and it also encourages us to be willing to notice the thoughts and feelings without being swept away by them, right? Recognizing that we have thoughts and feelings, that those thoughts and feelings don't have us. So that's the willing element. And then, importantly, in response to your question, it empowers us to take action in line with our personal values. And some of those values may be about self care. Do you know what? Perhaps a duvet day is exactly what would be required in that situation. If
mhm,
that's something that is important that you recognize you need to invest time, energy, and effort and choices in, then that's great. But for another person, it might well be about, well, being outside in nature is important to me. I'm going to commit to making a choice to go out for that walk and to spend time close to nature because that's important to me. So it depends, right? So
mhm.
often the answer to these questions is it depends. It
Right,
depends
right.
on the context. It depends on the person. It depends on what their values and their sense of purpose might be. And ACT has a range of tools that allow people to explore their sense of purpose and their personal values so that the intervention is very much tailored to what matters to them.
I like what you were saying about, often when you feel down, you are looking at life through a very narrow lens. In some of the conversations that we've had here, it's the question, what else is true? What else is happening right now? So, yes, in that lens, but if you widen your lens, the sun is outside, your dog is laying next to you, your child is healthy, like whatever your set of what else is true
Mm,
can sometimes help you to feel better.
I love
Not
that.
always. Sometimes you get stuck in that muck of what doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
But I like that there are these steps that you can take to not push those feelings away. But yes, I feel this way, but I also know and feel that these other things are true as well.
That's beautiful. I love that. And that comes through a lot in the work that I will do with clients. And it comes through in the language that we express things in, Patricia.
Hmm.
Often we'll say things like, uh, I'm having these difficult thoughts and feelings, but I'm unsure of whether I can go out and cope with doing the things that I need to do because I'm having those thoughts and those feelings. And it's about swapping the but for an and,
Mm.
right? It's that idea if I'm having these difficult thoughts and feelings, and there are things that I want to go out into the world to do, that those two things can be true, as you were alluding to at the same time, and that we can carry those thoughts and those feelings with us as we commit to making choices in line with those values and that sense of purpose. So the but can put these, our choices and our emotions in opposition to each
Hmm.
other. Whereas the and, swapping the and for the but, helps us to recognize that these things can coexist, that they can operate in parallel, not in opposition to each other.
But you say that, emotions are messengers
Hmm.
and they can be very important messengers. So, how does one decipher what the message is? Like, often when someone feels low, they might blame it on, let's just say, their partner.
Hmm.
He didn't empty the dishwasher properly. He came
Hmm.
home late. He did whatever he did. But it may be completely different. It may be that you are feeling sad about a memory and the things around you that don't seem perfect just take on so much more weight. How does one identify the messenger of the message of the emotion?
There's a couple of different ways that I could approach that. And it would be remiss of me not to mention emotion focused couples therapy,
Uh-huh.
EFCT, right?
Okay.
Which is something that I'm trained in as well, and it's incredibly helpful for couples work because my ears peaked at the mention of someone being sad because of the behavior, potentially their interpretation of the behavior of their partner. And yeah, we can get caught up in these cycles of responding, and
Mhm.
those cycles of responding are often dictated to by secondary emotions, which I mentioned earlier. Secondary emotions tend to be things like
Mm.
frustration, annoyance, anger, and secondary emotions sometimes are easier to go to than the
Mhm.
primary emotions that sit
Right?
underneath it, right? And we can be arguing with our partner about one thing, but actually it's about something much deeper. And it could relate to our attachment history when we have felt rejected or indeed bullied by others. And there's a sense of sadness, loneliness that can show up for us in our relationships. And sometimes that sadness and loneliness is so hot that it's just something we don't want to go near. So we get caught up in these cycles of responding to the secondary emotions about the dishwasher not being emptied and the frustration and anger and annoyance that that can give rise to. And we can get into these cycles of pursuing our partner or indeed avoiding interactions with our partner rather than dropping down into those primary emotions, which, by the way, as you'll be aware, require a lot of vulnerability
Mm.
because they have deep and long histories, those primary emotions. So, yeah, I'd be interested to explore what primary emotions might sit underneath and how the person could be facilitated to perhaps embrace some sense of vulnerability in communicating how they maybe feel deep down in those moments when there seems to be a distance between them and their partner. So, that would be potentially one angle of attack. But the way I do that generally in one to one work rather than couples work, so that was a bit of a diversion. Thank you for facilitating that. It would be about what I call hypothesis generating. And it's basically suggesting, going with a kind of hunch that might be there from my clinical experience about what that emotion might be communicating. And just being willing, and this is where as therapists, we have to embrace our sense of vulnerability and about being potentially wrong in the ideas that we might be sharing. But can I just check in with you about what function that kind of annoyance and frustration might be serving in this moment? Is it because you feel that you're not being adequately supported? Is that the function that this emotion could be serving? And, I'm very open to being wrong. And I really do emphasize that in the conversations I have with clients. And they're the expert on their experience. And I invite them to, maybe if I've got it wrong, to suggest their ideas about, what might be the function of the emotion that they're experiencing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's very much through that sense of curiosity and shared curiosity and generating some hypotheses or some ideas about what might be going on, and then checking in with the client about how that's landing with them. Does that feel like that's maybe getting to the core of this or not?
yeah. I'm so glad you said that because it does seem like an iterative process and also one that is a feeling one. You get to a point and you're like, that's it. That feels right. So that's really interesting. In the
So it's
book,
it's a process of shared inquiry.
right.
Inquiry is a word that I often use in training whenever I'm working with other therapists. And yeah, it's that
Yeah.
shared, curious inquiry around what might be going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that so much. In the book, you talk about motivational modes for interacting with
Mm,
the world. And so you've got a lot of great little, like, kind of mnemonic methods, if you will, for remembering these things. So will you talk a little bit about this is get, threat,
and
reset,
reset.
and thrive? Will you talk a little bit about what you mean by
Yeah,
those and how we
lovely.
can integrate that? Yeah.
I will, yeah. So for me, a central concept in the book is thriving, right? Thriving. And it's a word that we often use in everyday language, but it does have a particular psychological connotation.
Hmm.
And in sports psychology in particular, the concept of thriving in recent years has come to the fore around this idea of both performing well and feeling well. Indeed, if you look at the British Olympic team, their vision over the last two Olympic cycles has been winning well, winning well. And that's capturing these two pillars of performance and well being, because we
Mm,
can all go out hell for leather, really trying to achieve being very focused on outcome, and it comes at a huge cost, burnout. So winning well or thriving is about putting emphasis on both of these elements. And for me, nature again is a great analog, a great analogy for thriving. Let's go back to trees, Patricia, if you'll allow me. So trees in spring and summer in Northern Ireland here, I look out the window and the trees are in full bloom. It's a beautiful part of the year and one of my favorites. So the tree is busy photosynthesizing. It's using its leaves to capture the sun's energy, to convert that into fuel. So the tree is in get mode.
mhm,
It's go, 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 right? It's striving to capture the sun's energy. It's growing its branches towards the light so it can capture that. And that's a bit like our get mode. In life, it's hugely important for us to strive to work towards outcomes. If we weren't motivated to do that, our species would have died out eons ago. We have to be guided by goals, and we have a strive mode that allows us to seek reward, both on a biological and a physical and also psychological level. So let's move then into the second mode, which is threat mode. And again, trees need to have energy invested in protecting themselves. And we don't appreciate that, but things like fungi can kill a tree if it doesn't have its defense mechanisms. Bug infestations can kill a tree. So it needs to have its threat mode where it responds to potential risk and danger. And I think that's analogous to our threat mode. We need to be sensitive to risk and to danger. And that has helped us to survive and to thrive. Now, we have these beautiful symbolic brains that are very advanced compared to other animal species, but they then generate symbolic threats, symbolic risks, imagined risks. So, in addition to threats that are clear and present that we have to respond to, saber-toothed tiger, need to go, or I'll be lunch, we have the, oh my goodness, email inbox on a Monday morning, symbolic threat that we're also contending with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have our threat mode. And then trees also have a reset mode. So in autumn and winter, they drop their leaves, they go dormant, they start to get revitalized so that they can go again. And we too need our reset mode, which is about connecting back with ourselves, our sense of purpose, realigning, connecting with the world around us. And that includes both nature and other people, and really having the opportunity to soothe ourselves. So, yeah, we have our reset mode. So,
Mm-hmm.
just like trees have get, threat, and reset, we need to have our get, threat, and reset. And arguably, in modern life, our get and our threat systems are highly activated. And unfortunately, the reset mode can be our poor cousin. It gets underutilized. And I argue in the book that we need to be more concerted, more purposeful, more deliberate in making time to get into reset mode.
You also say, getting back to the get,
Mm-hmm.
that a high performance mindset can be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I am a big fan of relentlessness.
Okay.
I I competed in an event at the weekend called the Wicklow 200. It's a cycle event. It's an endurance cycle event.
Wow.
It's 200 kilometers, 11,000 feet of climbing, quite an undertaking. And yeah, I needed to be fairly committed in the training and the run up to that event to get the job done. And I'm very pleased that I did. And relentlessness was a big part of that. There were moments of doubt, there were moments of
Mm.
concern, there were moments of jeopardy as well. And it was about seeing that through because this was an important commitment that I was making to myself and others. You know, I like to inspire and provide an example to other people too. So, yeah, relentlessness is important, but being relentlessly relentless will lead to burnout,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you talk about grit not
Yes.
being a good thing.
Well, you know, Angela Duckworth and her work on grit, there's a lot of that is important. And she worked with in educational contexts and in military contexts to demonstrate that these traits, being gritty, are important. But for me, I think adaptability is also important. Grit is really about two elements. It's this, yeah, being clear about passion, what matters to you, but it's about conscientiousness. It's
Mhm.
about sticking at something, sticking at something, sticking at something. Now, I could be very gritty in banging my head up against a brick wall. I could be very committed and conscientious about doing that, but that's not particularly great for the wall, nor is it particularly good for my head. So for me, I think there's an important focus that needs to fall on this notion of adaptability and what works well in the context that we find ourselves in. And I think that's where psychological flexibility comes to the fore because it has a real eye to context. It has a real eye to the function that certain emotions and thoughts might be serving. And it also guides us in making choices that are in line with our sense of purpose or passion, as Angela Duckworth talks about. Now, the other trait that I mentioned in the book is mental toughness. Right. And psychologically, there are some concerns about the science behind mental toughness and how it's measured. So there's the mental toughness questionnaire 4048. And there are some concerns about whether or not it's measuring what it claims to measure. And one of the key tenets that has been proposed for mental toughness by Clough, who was one of the original researchers that focused on mental toughness, is control, emotional control. It's this kind of idea of us needing to outmuscle our emotional experience. And for me, I have concerns about that. I think it sets up this context where it should be about controlling emotions. And for me, it's not about control. It's about changing the relationship that we have, allowing the emotions potentially to be present and still be able to make choices that are in line with our purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, mental
It's
toughness, too much focus on control.
it's an interesting distinction
Hmm.
because you talk a lot about the relationship, obviously, between psychological flexibility and well-being, and in the understanding of awe, the anchored, willing, and
Empowered.
empowered. Thank you. You say there's an opposite to that, which is lag, lost, avoidant, and grinding.
Hmm.
What is the relationship between those two? And is it
Hmm.
possible to move from one to the other?
Yeah. So I talk about thriving as being this transition from lag into awe.
Hmm.
So what is lag? Well, the L stands for lost, lost in time and place. Often we're up in our heads trying to figure out who we are, what we're about, what these experiences mean, what these thoughts and feelings mean. And we're disconnected to what's actually happening in the present moment. So that's lost. The A
Mm.
stands for avoidant, avoidant of difficult thoughts and feelings. And I can understand where that comes from. Indeed, in my life, I have
Mhm,
been in that
mhm,
place I mentioned earlier.
mhm,
I have cut myself off from certain experiences that might evoke particular emotions, and I've avoided those experiences, but my life got smaller. I was painting myself into a corner where I was limiting the choices that I was making,
mhm,
more about avoiding difficult emotions and actually being true to the stuff that really matters to me. And the G is grinding, grinding out familiar old routines, always doing what I'd only done and not getting an opportunity to learn that I could cope, not getting the opportunity to open up and broaden my repertoire of ways of responding, behaviors that I could engage in. So that's lag, lost, avoidant, and grinding out.
mhm,
And for me, thriving is about transitioning from that lag into the being anchored, willing,
mhm.
and empowered that
Yeah.
allows you to thrive.
What are you in the book, you have a lot of practices
Hmm.
to help you get into that space. Also, I know you mentioned that the title of the book is based on a Tanzanian proverb, but
Hmm.
I just wanna say that again, break the wind does not break the tree that bends. That's the actual proverb, right?
That's it.
So pretty. I love that. Okay. So, what are some of the daily practices? I wrote down roving reporter,
Hmm.
practice anchoring in the present, redefining success. Are there some that you think would be really helpful for us to understand?
Yeah. And another example would be the poplar approach. So POPLAR, another tree reference, but
Right.
yeah, and I alluded to that a little earlier whenever I was talking about your anxiety after the car crash. And yeah, Poplar is the first P is, well, pick up that a situation has evoked a strong reaction in you. Notice that. And those noticing skills are important.
Mhm,
So the O is will observe the most prominent emotion that might be
mhm,
present. And in this case, it was fear. You elaborated helpfully on the felt experience that you're having, and it was like sharp, it's that fear. The P, the second P is will pinpoint your initial urge to react in the situation, right? You got to validate that there is an urge to respond in a particular way. And in this case, it may have been to avoid driving, right? To step away from the vehicle. Yeah.
mm,
The L is locate where in your body the felt experience of that emotion is. Be curious. about where you're noticing that. And that's a different approach because often we have the emotion and we want to respond to it. We want to get rid of it. We want to control it. We want to try to suppress it potentially. And this invitation to locate where the felt experience of it is in your body is you being curious rather than responding or reacting immediately. The A is, well, assign the physical characteristics. And for some people, color may not work. Well, yeah, what color does that felt experience have? But for others, it does. You know, a lot of the clients, for example, that I would work with would talk about anger being red. You know, there's, I suppose, a cultural
Mm,
association in the West between red
yeah.
and anger, but it may be about texture. Well, is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it spiky? Is it slippery? Viscous? It's then about temperature. Is it hot? Is it cold? It might be about the pressure. You know, how much pressure do you feel in that part of your body? So you're assigning these physical characteristics to it.
Hmm.
And then the R is we'll recognize in this moment, you can hold the felt experience of that emotion. And I applaud you for doing it. And you can choose to respond now in a way that's consistent with your values, with your sense of purpose. And that could be, for example, about driving the car so that you can take the kids to school, for example. It will vary depending on the individual.
Right, right, of
Now, at the
course.
end of that exercise, Patricia, I'll say to the client, by the way, you know that urge that you talked to me about, that kind of pinpoint the urge that you have to respond in this moment. That was the second P. I'll say to the client, you can go with that urge to react, and you've also got an awareness of the value consistent response that you identified right at the end, at the R. So recognize that you can hold this emotion and you can choose to respond in a way that's more in line with your values. So I'll say to the client, that choice is yours, and I empower you to make that choice. I'm not here to tell anybody to behave in a particular way. I'm here to be a catalyst for people to change up if they wish
Hmm.
to, how they might respond. Now, I have no hard and fast evidence here. This is anecdotal, but I would say around 90% at least of my clients would go with that value consistent choice that they identify at that final
Yeah.
step rather
Yeah.
than the urge they have to react.
Yeah. Such good advice. Such great advice. Is there anything else that you would like to share that was really meaningful for you in the book?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
mentioned the roving reporter,
Yeah.
which is another practice that I think is important and I think will be helpful for those watching and listening. So, the roving reporter is about helping us to shift the relationship we can have with the difficult stories that our mind can generate.
Mm.
And like broadcasters and media outlets, our minds will have certain editorial policies. Okay, so we might have CNN, we might have Fox News, and there may be differences in the types of stories that those media outlets might run. Okay, and our minds can be very similar. They will pick up on particular themes, and those themes could relate to our sense of our own capabilities and competencies. And we might have stories that our mind generates about not being good when the pressure comes on, right? Or not being as good as other people who are doing the same role, right? Those kind of stories can pop up in our minds and the scripts that our mind generate about who we are and what we're capable of. Now, I invite my clients to imagine that they are a reporter on the scene of their thought, holding a microphone, speaking into camera, just like I am speaking to you, relaying the story back to the studio, right? Now, if we think about reporters in situ, it's not within their remit to get caught up in the story. That doesn't fly particularly well, all right, with the news team back at studio. Your role is to recognize the story, share the story back. Now, the reporter is not there to just give the same old story over and over again, right? They need to be able to let go of the story that they're reporting so that they can move on to the next story. And I think that's a nice metaphor for how we can be. And I do this. I'll be driving
Mhm,
in my
mhm.
car. Speaking of cars, I'll be driving in my car and I'll recognize that thought about maybe not having left the house in time and running a bit late. Yes, it's all a bit frantic. And I might look down at the clock in my car and say, oh, it's 9:57 in the morning. And I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I am not particularly well organized and never learn my lessons. Right. And there I am reporting it back, imagining that I'm reporting it back. And then I come back to the here and now and move on through the day. So I hope that that's a useful exercise for helping people to recognize that the stories their mind generates might have a kind of fake news element at times. It does have its editorial policy, our mind,
Mhm.
and that we can be the reporter on the scene of our thought. Our job is not to get caught up in the story, it's to notice it and to share it. And we have to be prepared to move on to new stories that could be just around the corner,
Yeah,
literally.
yeah. Ross, why did you go into this work to begin with? Were you an anxious child? Were you always curious about helping people with their problems? What was your motivation to go into this work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I was always curious about people and their choices and their behaviors.
Mhm.
I was schooled by a great biology teacher in my last couple of years of, I guess it would be senior high school, they call it in the States. And the biology teacher had had some psychology training during their bachelor's degree and talked to us about psychology. And that was the first time it was really aware. I started to become aware of psychology as a field of study. And then I got to read a bit about Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and the contemporaries. And yeah, it just fascinated me as an area of study and work. So
Yeah.
yeah, I got hooked. And my uncle Tom, he was a big presence in my life. And he was very interested in theologies, theology, psychology. He was also a great philosopher. He wrote poetry. And I think he was a deep thinker and really opened my eyes to the importance of philosophy and psychology in everyday life. So, yeah, he was
Wow.
a big influence in, I think, the choices that I made.
Nice. Very lucky. And that's awesome to hear. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really, really appreciate all your wisdom and just the way that you explain things. So helpful. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being with us.
It's been a pleasure, Patricia. Thank you for your interest in the book and for the great questions today. I've really enjoyed the conversation.